for Creamer Media's Polity, I'm Sashnee Moodley. Researcher and analyst Professor Raymond Suttner joins me to discuss ANC's legacies, heroes or rogues. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you.
Why are you so intent on debunking the idea that the ANC can correct itself or remedy its problems?
Yeah, I would be very happy if the ANC could remedy its problems, because that would be a contribution towards rebuilding democracy, even if the ANC is no longer the dominant force in South African politics. It is desirable to have all political parties and organizations contribute towards democratic debate, strengthening our institutions and things like that. But my sense is that the ANC is not really, well, first of all, a lot of the discourse in the ANC is about returning the ANC to its true self, as if there is an ANC that we must just go back to, turn the clock back 20 or 30 years and then pick up from there. Now, first of all, conditions then were completely different. When I was head of political education in 1990, some people said to me, why don't you get all the commissars from the camps together, get them to help you with political education? And I said, no, we can't, because the conditions that they worked under were completely different from now. First of all, the ANC is a legal organization, not a military and illegal organization. Secondly, the whole world was changing. There was a new world order. The socialist states were busy collapsing, things like that. Now, consequently, you can't go back to it politically, but also when people say go back to the ANC that we know, it's not an uncontentious ANC. And what I tried to point out in my article is that the ANC of the past was both an organization that produced very heroic figures who are exemplary, people who one can say to young people, this is the sort of person on whom I think you should model yourself. But there were also rogues. There were also people who abused others, who used violence unnecessarily, who stole, who abused women, things like this. So I think we've got to understand that the ANC past has to be looked at critically. Its ideological past, which I didn't deal with in the article, which can't just be taken over like National Democratic Revolution as if it's obvious what it means for all time. Secondly, the way in which the ANC conducted itself in the past was not always exemplary. I mentioned cases, and since I wrote the article, people have been sending me messages confirming some things that I suggested. Someone says that they're going to contest what I said, but confirming that some things happened in front of them, some of the things that I suggested. And so that a lot of people are aware of abuse that occurred. Now, it's very important to understand that the history, other people are only overjoyed that I exposed some things. Now, my object was not to expose things. My object was to say the ANC legacies are complex. There was abuse, but there was also heroic activities, comradely activities, caring activities, unselfish activities. And I think the whole is real. We've got to take that legacy and build on what was good. Not everything was bad. There were some good things, some very important things. In fact, I would like to think most of it was good, but I don't have a way of estimating. So I'm concerned that when people say the ANC must always self-correct, what exactly is it that the ANC is going to retrieve from the past? Because the past is not one thing.
So who do we look to rebuild our democratic order?
Well, you know, the ANC may well be one part of that process. And it's very difficult to map out a program for rebuilding democracy in South Africa because we're talking about organization. And I don't have, like at these places where the unemployed line up, I don't have 1,000 people waiting there to hear what I have in mind in terms of building. And I think we've got to be appreciative of the fact that building a type of united organization that can advance democratic goals, recover clean government, things like this, is very complicated. Now, just to give you an example of why I think some people don't always see the complications, is that Farah Haffajee wrote a very good article. In fact, it was 3 articles in the City Press last week. But in the course of this, she referred to the Save South Africa movement as a version of the United Democratic Front. Now, it's just not correct, because Save South Africa, whatever the virtues of the organization, is a very much a limited issue organization. Secondly, it is not a broad front. It hasn't got structures like branches or, let's say, affiliated organizations. The United Democratic Front was formed initially to oppose 2 bills, but it later became a broad anti-apartheid movement. It was a movement of civics, of youth, of small business, of professionals, of sports people, health professionals, number of different types. And it was incomparably different from the Save South Africa movement. Whatever the virtues of Save South Africa and other organizations may be, they are not conceived as a united front. Also, the United Democratic Front organized people on the basis of where they were. If they were shopkeepers, they had particular things that worried them, Group Areas Act or other legislation in African townships. If they were teachers, they had these problems, or students, they had certain other problems. Now, the various movements to remove Zuma are not focused on a number of other issues. They're focused on that. So that is the difference. But the NUMSA, we've mentioned before, they're just about to go to another Congress. In their 2013 Congress, they made a decision to launch a United Democratic Front. And there was an article yesterday about NUMSA, and they are now wanting to establish a political party. But it seems to me that the way in which that United Front of NUMSA was conceived was not really as a broad front of organizations. And what we can learn from the UDF is that although most of the people who initiated it believed in the Freedom Charter, they didn't make that a condition for joining the UDF. It was only much later, during the 1980s state of emergency, that they decided to adopt the Freedom Charter. Now, the problem I have with the NUMSA initiative is that it is putting political orientation in the forefront. Well, it was in the beginning. I don't know what's happened since then. They say they won some seats in local government elections. They got 1 mayor. But really, as far as everyday presence of that United Front, it must be semi-underground because you don't see much of it. one of the reasons I think you don't see much of it is that they have put ideological issues, neoliberalism, things like this, instead of what is it that worries you, Mama, in this place? Have you got healthcare here? What is the state of the toilets? All those sorts of things. So my feeling then is that we are in for the long haul. I have no idea where to start, but I think that we must talk to a number of sectors, the faith-based organizations, business, professionals, teachers, students, get all of these people involved in organizational efforts which will contribute towards rebuilding democratic rule in South Africa.
Thank you, Professor.
Thanks.
That was Professor Raymond Suttner speaking to Creamer Media's Polity about the ANC's legacies, heroes or rogues.